What if I told you that the most dangerous weapon in a murder investigation isn't a revolver or a stiletto or, a vial of exotic poison?
Right, it's something way more common.
Exactly. It's a tiny, completely unremarkable garden seed. I mean, a seed so small that if you dropped it on the floor right now, you wouldn't even be able to find it.
You just walk right over it.
Yep, you would. Well, welcome to Under the Hood. We are broadcasting live from the little station on Commercial Street in historic Atchison, Kansas, on this really beautiful day, Monday, July 27, 2026.
It's a great day to be in the studio, honestly.
Oh, it really is. If you could see us, you'd know we are sitting in what has to be the coziest old radio studio on Earth. I mean, we are just surrounded by towering, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves overflowing with philosophy and theology.
Don't forget the faint smell of pipe smoke.
Right, the pipe smoke, a couple of half-empty coffee cups between us, and right here on the desk, a massive, well-worn stack of classic detective novels.
It really is the perfect environment for what we do here. I mean, it's a space that practically demands you slow down and, look a little closer at the things you usually rush past.
And that is the exact mission of this deep dive. Like, if you are tuning in expecting a simple scene-by-scene recap of today's featured story, you are definitely in the wrong place.
Yeah, you can get a plot summary anywhere on the internet.
Exactly. Our goal is to rip up the floorboards. We want to reveal the hidden architecture beneath the narrative, to show you the philosophical framing, the theological foundation, and, well, the structural genius that makes the mystery actually work.
Because a great mystery, especially in this specific literary tradition, is never just a puzzle box about who committed a crime. It is a mirror held up to the worldview of the author, and it exposes the hidden assumptions of the society in which the crime takes place.
That is so true. But before we go one step further, I have to deliver a very strict warning.
Yes, the warning.
Spoiler warning. This deep dive is a full literary and theological exploration into the mustard seed murders. We discuss the solution, the clues, the murderer, Father Brown's reasoning, and the story's spiritual themes.
So listeners should definitely enjoy the original story first before listening to this discussion.
Please take that warning seriously. The experience of having the truth dawn on you in real time as you listen to the original broadcast. I mean, that is a joy you do not want us to steal from you. Go listen, then come right back.
Assuming they're still here, I think we're ready to dig in.
If you're still here, you are ready. To do that, we have pulled a fascinating stack of sources for today's discussion. We are looking at the original audio play of the Mustard Seed Murders.
Right, and we're pulling from the accompanying Chesterton Radio Morning Prayer, which focused on the theme of the greatness of small things.
We are also diving deeply into the biblical texts that serve as the bedrock of the narrative, specifically Matthew 13, Mark 4, and Luke 13. And finally, we have several transcripts analyzing the underlying philosophy of G.K. Chesterton himself.
It's an incredibly rich tapestry. We are looking at how ancient scripture, early 20th century mystery tropes, and profound theology all just violently intersect in one quiet little English village.
Okay, let's unpack this, because what immediately grabbed me is how this story marries the rigid, hyperlogical tradition of the Golden Age detective novel with these sweeping, almost mystical theological truths.
Oh, absolutely.
And the anchor for all of it is the foundational metaphor of the narrative, right? The parable of the mustard seed.
Yeah, to understand the architecture of the story, we have to start where the author started. The narrative is directly inspired by today's morning prayer meditation and Christ's famous parables.
In Matthew 13.
Right, in Matthew 13, Jesus says, "The kingdom of heaven is like to a grain of mustard seed, which a man took and sowed in his field, which indeed is the least of all seeds. But when it is grown, it is the greatest among herbs, and becometh a tree, so that the birds of the air come and lodge in the branches thereof."
But let me jump in right here, because I think a modern listener hears that and pictures like a dandelion or a little garden weed.
Yeah, a tiny little sprout.
And if you're trying to build a metaphor for an all-powerful eternal kingdom, a garden weed feels incredibly underwhelming. It almost feels like a bad metaphor.
It totally feels like a bad metaphor until you look at the actual botanical reality of the plant Christ was referencing.
Yeah.
I mean, he wasn't talking about the yellow mustard you put on a hot dog.
All right, not the condiment.
No, he's talking about the black mustard plant, botanically known as Sinapis magre. If you look at how this specific plant grows, particularly in the rich, fertile soil of the Jordan Valley, the transformation is staggering.
Staggering how?
Well, it begins as a microscopic speck. The seed is so small that in first century Judea, it was culturally used as a proverbial placeholder for the tiniest thing imaginable, much like we might say something is a drop in the bucket.
Oh, okay.
But when Xenophis nigra germinates, it grows with a ferocious, explosive speed. The stems don't stay green and pliable. They become thick, rigid, and woody.
Wait, really? Like a tree?
Exactly like a tree. In fact, historical naturalists traveling through the region in the 19th century documented fields of black mustard growing so tall and so dense that a man could sit on horseback and be completely hidden within the canopy.
Wait, a plant the size of a man on a horse from a seed the size of a grain of sand?
Exactly. And that extreme, almost violent contrast between the microscopic beginning and the massive sheltering end is the entire point of the parable.
Even knowing that, though, I have to imagine this teaching didn't land well with the original audience. I mean, if I am a first-century Jew living under the crushing, brutal boot of the Roman Empire, I am praying for a conquering Messiah.
You want an army.
I want an army. I'm expecting a military genius to ride in with a zealot army, establish a massive geopolitical stronghold, and overthrow Caesar with fire and sword. I want shock and awe.
And
instead, Jesus stands up and hands me a teaching about a tiny seed. It's like expecting a massive military campaign, and instead someone hands you a packet of garden seeds and says, here's the revolution, go put these in the dirt. It must have felt insulating.
Oh, it was deeply subversive. It subverts everything the world both then and now honestly believes about power, success, and scale.
Yeah, we always want the big spectacle.
Right. Christ is establishing a reality that Chesterton deeply loved. God builds his kingdom not by spectacle, not by noise, and not by military force, but by the faithful, unseen tending of small, overlooked things.
The tending of a garden.
Exactly. The microscopic seed becomes the massive shelter for the birds of the air, which symbolically represents the diverse nations of the world finding refuge in God's kingdom.
So how does this ancient, subversive biblical concept get translated into the actual plot of the mustard seed murders?
Yeah.
It's done with such subtlety.
It really is.
We are dropped into this quiet little village of St. Bartholomew, and the setting itself embodies this tension. There's this modest memorial garden, and right in the corner, there's a tiny, neat patch of mustard plants. It's no larger than a dining table.
Barely noticeable if you aren't looking for it.
Right. And early in the story, we see these visiting gentlemen looking at it, and they are visibly disappointed. One of them actually scoffs and murmurs, I expected something grander.
I expected something grander. That single line of dialogue is the thesis statement for the entire narrative.
Oh, 100%.
Those visiting gentlemen are acting exactly like the crowds in first-century Judea who wanted a spectacular Messiah. They look at the smallness of the mustard patch, they apply human metrics of scale and importance to it, and they just dismiss it as worthless.
But Father Brown walks up.
Bends down, looks at those tiny yellow blossoms dancing in the breeze, and immediately recognizes the ferocious potential slumbering inside them.
Which brings me to the core question of this whole setup. What was Chesterton really saying here?
The big question.
Through the author of this story, what is the underlying message about these small things, especially when we look at a character like Sir Reginald? Because Sir Reginald isn't just ignoring the garden. He actively resents it.
He does resent it. And to answer that, we have to look at the profound symbolism of cultivation in the story. Look at the stark contrast between the victim, Sir Reginald Ashcombe, and the little 9-year-old girl, Emily.
Oh, the dynamic between those two is fascinating.
It is. Sir Reginald is a wealthy man of the world. He looks at the mustard plants and explicitly tells Emily he hopes they don't grow because they'll only make everything untidy.
He's obsessed with pristine, polished order. He wants the gravel path perfectly raked. He wants nature forced into straight, predictable lines.
Sir Reginald values appearance over reality. He values a dead, controllable order over chaotic, vibrant, messy life.
Unlike Emily.
Exactly. But little Emily, who is out there carefully watering these plants with a tin watering can that's nearly as big as she is, understands something fundamentally deeper. She tells Sir Reginald, my grandfather says gardens aren't supposed to stay tidy.
I love that line so much.
Emily represents the faithful tending of small things. She is participating in the slow, unseen miracle of cultivation. She is cooperating with the natural grace of the world, whereas Sir Reginald is constantly trying to pave over it.
That perfectly sets up the relationship between appearances and reality. Sir Reginald looks powerful, wealthy, and ordered, but his soul, as we find out, is spiritually dead.
Completely dead.
And the mustard plants look tiny and insignificant, but they contain an unstoppable life force. And that exact tension, the friction between what is visible on the surface and what is actually real underneath, brings us right to the mystery itself. and specifically to the detectives trying to solve it.
Yes, the classic clash of investigative methodologies.
This is my favorite part of analyzing Golden Age mysteries. You have to contrast the archetypes. On one hand, you have the shadow of Sherlock Holmes.
Oh, of course. Holmes is always the benchmark.
Right, so if you put Holmes in that memorial garden at St. Bartholomew, what is he doing? He is down on his hands and knees with a magnifying glass.
Measuring the dirt?
Yes. He is analyzing the exact chemical composition of a discarded cigar ash on the bench. He is taking plaster casts of bicycle tire treads. He is measuring the millimeter distance between footprints to mathematically calculate the exact stride, height, and gait of the killer.
Because for Holmes, the universe is a giant, complicated clockwork machine. And if you just measure the gears accurately enough, you will invariably find the truth.
And then on the other hand, you have Father Brown, who usually drops his umbrella, looks completely lost, and stares at a cloud while the police are measuring footprints.
Just kind of ambling around the crime scene.
But Father Brown still solves the mystery. And he does it without caring at all about the chemical composition of the cigar ash. He solves it because he understands human nature. He understands sin, pride, repentance, fear, and grace. Holmes relies on material science. Father Brown relies on spiritual realism.
What's fascinating here is why a Catholic priest makes such a uniquely brilliant detective. Chesterton's great insight was exposing a massive societal assumption.
What assumption?
Well, people view priests as naive, sheltered men who are locked away in a cloister reading dusty books, completely ignorant of the real gritty world. But the reality is the exact opposite.
Oh, absolutely.
A parish priest sits in a wooden confessional box week after week, year after year. He hears the actual, unvarnished, horrifying reality of human depravity. He listens to completely ordinary, respectable people confessing their greed, their lust, their petty cruelties, their betrayals, and their deepest, most venomous hatreds.
He knows what humans are actually capable of when the doors are closed.
Precisely. A police detective only sees the tiny fraction of humanity that actually commits a statutory crime and gets caught. A priest sees the dark, bubbling, hidden motives of the entire community.
That's a huge difference in perspective.
It is. He knows from daily experience that the line between a highly respected citizen and a cold-blooded murderer is shockingly thin.
We see this clash of worldviews perfectly dramatized through the conflict between Inspector Gresham and Father Brown. Gresham arrives on the scene, and he is this capable, posture-perfect, metric-driven officer.
Right, looking for the master criminal.
Exactly. He immediately starts looking for a cinematic mastermind. He wants a grand conspiracy. He stands over the body of Sir Reginald, catalogs the physical evidence, and asks the standard, logical police question, who wished Sir Reginald dead?
Which is the logical question to ask if you view murder merely as the mechanical cessation of life. But Father Brown flips the entire perspective upside down.
He really does.
He looks at the scattering of seeds, he looks at the victim's face, and he says, no, I think we ought first to ask who wished him to live.
Which completely short-circuits the inspector's brain. He can't process it.
Because Father Brown understands something about the psychology of sin. As he says later in the story, hatred explains very little, but love often explains everything.
Such a powerful quote.
Hatred is chaotic, right? It's a blind, destructive force that often burns itself out in a tavern brawl. But love, or a twisted, desperate, protective sense of love, someone trying to protect their community, or someone avenging a loved one whose life was ruined, that provides a much clearer, much more specific, and much more patient motive for a calculated murder.
So he's looking at the motive through a completely different lens.
Yes. Father Brown isn't looking at the mechanics of the poison first. He's looking at the shape of the human heart that decided to deliver it.
This brings up another classic Chesterton trope that plays a massive role in Father Brown's methodology: the invisible ordinary person. If you've read Chesterton before, you know the famous invisible postman trope.
Ah, yes. The postman who walks right past a group of reliable upper-class witnesses carrying a mailbag into a building.
And nobody sees him.
Right. When those witnesses are later questioned by the police, they swear under oath that absolutely no one went into the building.
Have you ever experienced that? Like, have you ever just not registered a person's existence because of their uniform?
Oh, all the time. The delivery drivers, the maintenance workers.
The witnesses' brains literally filtered the postman out. They saw a uniform, they saw a lower-class worker doing a routine, mundane job, and their retinas simply didn't register him as a human being capable of altering the plot of their lives. He was, as Chesterton put it, merely part of the background furniture of reality.
Father Brown succeeds where the police fail, precisely because he respects the deep significance of the unnoticed. He doesn't dismiss the old gardener raking the gravel. He doesn't dismiss the little girl watering the plants.
He pays attention to all of it.
He doesn't dismiss the tiny, everyday, boring routines of village life. He knows that the most profound truths and the most dangerous secrets are always hidden within the most ordinary things.
So why does this matter beyond the mystery itself? Because it feels like there's a massive cultural critique happening beneath the surface here, one that applies heavily to us today.
There absolutely is, and it matters immensely because our modern, metric-obsessed world does exactly what Inspector Gresham and those upper-class witnesses do. We constantly filter out the ordinary.
You really do. We just ignore it.
Think about it. We are culturally obsessed with scale, with viral moments, with massive data sets, with things that look grand. And in doing so, we become completely blind to the quiet, slow, faithful realities of everyday life.
We miss the people right in front of us.
We ignore the people who clean the buildings, the people who tend the gardens, the small acts of daily discipline. Chesterton is shouting a warning to us. If you only live for the spectacular, you will miss the truth entirely. You will be easily fooled by the world, and worse, you will be easily fooled by the devil, who loves to hide in the mundane.
That is a chilling thought. If we are blind to the small things, we are incredibly vulnerable, and that perfectly transitions us into the actual mechanics of the mystery in this story. Because this isn't a cheat, it's a classic, fair play, golden age construction.
Right, no tricks on the reader.
Exactly. The clues aren't pulled out of a hat in the final act. They are hidden right in plain sight from the very beginning.
The author plays completely fair with you as the listener. All the pieces of the puzzle are laid out on the table.
Let's break down these clues because the construction is brilliant. First, we have the visible clues in the garden itself. We are told early on that the seed pods on the mustard plants burst in the afternoon heat, naturally scattering these tiny black seeds all over the damp gravel path.
The setting practically plants the seeds for you, literally.
Father Brown even has a casual conversation with the old gardener about how the seeds will spread everywhere if they aren't kept after.
That dialogue establishes the natural mechanism. The seeds are loose, they are sticky because of the damp earth, and they are ubiquitous in that specific location.
Next, we have the condition of the victim. When Sir Reginald is found dead, the inspector immediately assumes the single mustard seed found near his hand is a deliberate calling card.
A supervillain's signature.
Right. But what does Father Brown notice? He looks at Sir Reginald's polished leather shoes and trouser cuffs. He sees damp earth, yellow pollen, and dozens, maybe hundreds, of mustard seeds clinging to the leather.
Which completely recontextualizes the clue.
Right. And then there is the murder weapon itself. How was the cyanide administered? Because nobody saw anyone force him to drink poison. We are told earlier in the story, in a seemingly throwaway line of character description, that Sir Reginald has an ordinary fastidious habit. He always moistens his fingers before adjusting his tight leather gloves.
A tiny, insignificant personal routine.
But let's look at the mechanics of that. The murderer knows this habit. So the murderer places a highly concentrated paste of potassium cyanide on the underside of the silver knob of Sir Reginald's walking stick.
Just waiting for him to touch it.
Sir Reginald leans on the stick while walking through the garden. The invisible residue transfers to his fingers. A few minutes later, he goes to adjust his gloves. He touches his tongue to his fingers to moisten them.
And that's all it takes.
The moisture from his saliva immediately activates the rapid absorption of the cyanide through the mucous membranes in his mouth, and within minutes, he is dead. It is a brilliant, terrifyingly simple mechanism.
And finally, we have the setting of the second murder. Harold Pierce is found dead in the locked vestry of the church.
Oh, the locked room.
Yes. The door is heavily bolted from the inside. The only window is a high ventilator window near the ceiling that only opens a few inches. It seemed like an impossible supernatural escape by the killer. But early in the story, Father Brown casually notices the long, heavy cord attached to the window latch used by the verger to open and close it from the floor.
So you have these four incredibly mundane physical realities laid out for the listener-bursting pods: sticky polished shoes, a habit of moistening fingers, and a window cord.
All perfectly normal things.
And what's brilliant is how Inspector Gresham is completely misled by his own assumptions about these clues. Gresham's false assumptions are the real enemy of truth here. He finds the single mustard seed and immediately leaps to the conclusion that it's a cinematic serial killer signature, a message, he calls it. He desperately wants it to be a grand symbol.
Because that's what he's trained to look for.
And when he encounters the locked room, He assumes it requires some sort of secret sliding panel, a hidden trapdoor, or a diabolical, impossible trick.
He is looking at the umbrella and thinking it's the sky, to use Father Brown's famous analogy. He applies a grand, complex theory to a simple, mundane reality.
So how does Father Brown take these mundane clues and tear apart Gresham's grand, false assumptions to reveal the hidden architecture of the crime?
Father Brown's logic is a masterclass in deducing reality by systematically stripping away theatricality.
Stripping away the drama.
Exactly. He looks at Sir Reginald's shoes and realizes that the first seed wasn't a message at all. It was a total accident. Sir Reginald walked through the garden, the pods had burst, the ground was damp, and the seeds naturally stuck to his polished leather shoes.
Just normal physics.
As he collapsed and died from the cyanide, one of those seeds simply fell off his shoe or transferred to his hand.
It was an accident of nature. It wasn't the design of a killer.
Exactly. And this is the genius deduction that breaks the case open. If the first seed was a total accident, then the second seed found on the second victim, Harold Pierce, inside the locked church.
Had to be an imitation.
Yes. Someone placed the second seed there deliberately. The murderer realized the police thought the first accidental seed was a sinister signature, so the murderer capitalized on that false assumption.
That is so clever.
They deliberately planted a second seed on the second victim to create a false link, leading the police to hunt for a serial killer with a calling card. The murderer tried to connect the two deaths by faking a signature that never actually existed in the first place.
Here's where it gets really interesting, the locked room solution. If you were standing in that vestry, you'd look at that high window and think it's physically impossible for someone to escape through it. You'd be looking for trapdoors just like Inspector Gresham.
Because it looks impossible.
But once Father Brown realizes the murderer is just an ordinary person using ordinary things to fake a grand mystery, the locked room becomes ridiculously simple.
There are no secret panels. There is no trapdoor beneath the rug.
No. The murderer simply walked out the door of the vestry, went outside the church to the exterior wall, reached a stick, or their hand, through that narrow opening in the high ventilator window, grabbed the long cord used to operate the latch, pulled it taut to release the catch, let the heavy window swing shut, and allowed gravity to drop the metal latch back into place.
Just gravity and string.
It was just gravity, a piece of string, and an ordinary piece of church furniture. The murderer locked the room from the outside using the building's own completely normal mechanics. It's so beautifully simple that it's utterly invisible to a man like Gresham, who is neurotically looking for complexity.
And that profound simplicity brings us to the most tragic, most important part of the story, the murderer himself. Because the mechanics of the crime, the cyanide, the window cord, the fake seed, that's just the scaffolding.
Right, that's just the how.
The real mystery Chesterton cares about is the human soul that decided to build it.
We have to talk about Jonathan Mercer, the village pharmacist, because when Father Brown finally deduces it was him and confronts him, it's not this triumphant, aggressive police takedown.
Not at all. It's incredibly sad.
It's an incredibly sorrowful, quiet conversation. Mercer isn't a comic book villain. He's not an evil mastermind who enjoys inflicting pain. He's a man who has been deeply, slowly, agonizingly broken by carrying a terrible burden.
He is a man who has watched 30 years of small, perfectly legal injustices accumulate and crush the life out of his village.
Let's expand on his motive, because the missing acres, as they call it in the story, is heart-wrenching. Mercer explains his specific grievances to Father Brown. He watched Sir Reginald and his lackey, Harold Pierce, slowly siphon off the livelihood of the village over decades.
It was a slow bleed.
It wasn't one big crime. It was the widow losing her historic orchard because of an obscure legal clause in a deed she didn't understand. It was the local blacksmith losing the access lane to his forge because Sir Reginald moved a boundary line by 3 feet. It was the carpenter losing his workshop to a quiet foreclosure. It was the village school slowly losing its playing field to corporate expansion.
Notice the specific, agonizing detail Mercer points out, always perfectly legal. That is Chesterton's brilliant, searing critique of institutionalized, sanitized greed.
The law protecting the greedy.
Sir Reginald didn't commit violent bank robberies. He used quiet foreclosures, obscure legal maneuvers, and boundary lines shifted by a few feet. These were injustices so small individually and so heavily protected by the law that no ordinary person could fight them. But collectively, over 30 years, they destroyed the soul of the community.
And Mercer watched it happen over and over and over again. And here is the tragedy. He thought he was doing the right thing. He looked around and realized the law wouldn't stop Sir Reginald, and the police couldn't stop him.
He felt entirely alone in seeing the truth.
Mercer thought he was the only one willing to step up, so he took a tiny microscopic amount of cyanide, placed it on the silver knob of the walking stick, and killed him. A microscopic amount of poison to stop a massive, creeping evil.
Which brings us directly back to the theme of the mustard seed, but inverted. Instead of the greatness of small virtues, we are seeing the terrifying greatness of small evils.
Yes, the dark side of cultivation.
Great evil rarely begins with grand theatrical wickedness. A man doesn't wake up on a sunny Tuesday morning and decide to become a murderer. Great evil begins when we decide that one small injustice doesn't really matter.
It starts so small.
It begins when a wealthy man like Sir Reginald decides it's okay to legally steal a few feet of a widow's orchard because, oh, it's just a few feet, she won't starve. And begins when a genuinely good man like Mercer decides that a tiny drop of poison is justified to stop him. Both Sir Reginald and Mercer let the tiny seeds of sin take root in their souls. They watered those seeds with justification, and those seeds grew into a massive harvest of death.
Father Brown's reaction to this is so moving. Inspector Gresham is visibly confused because Father Brown seems almost sympathetic to the killer. Gresham can't compute it. And Father Brown delivers this beautiful, defining line. He says, "To a murderer, no. To a sinner. The two are not always the same thing."
It's the ultimate distinction between the state and the church, between the rigid letter of the law and the profound depth of grace.
Because Father Brown doesn't condone the murder for a single second. The murder is an objective, horrifying evil. But he looks at Mercer with profound sympathy because he sees the tragedy of a human soul that allowed itself to be twisted by despair.
He sees the spiritual toll it took on Mercer.
He sees a man who tried to play God and crushed himself under the weight of it. And we see the ultimate contrast between forensic evidence, which is Gresham's entire domain, and the human conscience, which is Brown's domain, right at the very end of the scene. Mercer is in handcuffs, being led away by the police. His life is effectively over. He is going to hang. And little Emily, the girl who waters the plants, looks at this convicted murderer and simply says, "I'll pray for you."
And Mercer, this man who has hardened his heart for 30 years to commit this crime, completely breaks down in tears. He weeps and says it's the first kind thing anyone has done for him all day.
Those tears represent the cracking of his pride. They represent the very beginning of a genuine spiritual repentance. It's not the handcuffs that break him, it's the mercy of a child. So, I have to ask it again. What was Chesterton really saying here? What is the ultimate theological takeaway from Mercer's tragic fall and Emily's simple kindness?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Chesterton is revealing a terrifying and beautiful spiritual reality. God builds his kingdom, and the devil builds his, through the exact same mechanism.
Wow, through the exact same mechanism, the slow accumulation of small things.
Yes, the slow, relentless, daily cultivation of tiny choices. The devil doesn't usually conquer a human soul with a grand, dramatic, cinematic pact signed in blood at midnight.
No, it's too obvious.
He conquers it through 30 years of tiny, perfectly justified resentments. He conquers it through small, legal thefts and quiet compromises. He plants the seeds of bitterness, and he waits patiently for them to grow into a canopy that blocks out the sun. But God operates the same way. Holiness isn't usually achieved through spectacular, gravity-defying miracles or sudden moments of absolute perfection. It is achieved through one unnoticed kindness, one quiet act of mercy, one sincere prayer offered by a little girl for a stranger in handcuffs.
The mustard seed works in both directions. The soil of the human heart will grow whatever seed you plant in it.
Exactly. Every day, with every tiny choice, we are planting a seed. The only question is which kingdom we are cultivating.
That is heavy, and it is beautiful, and it perfectly encapsulates why this story feels so deeply satisfying to listen to. The atmosphere of the story completely supports that heavy thematic weight. We listened to this as an audio play, and I am a massive fan of the classic BBC Saturday night theater productions from the mid-20th century.
Oh, me too. They're legendary.
Listening to this, I kept thinking, wouldn't this story fit perfectly into that golden age BBC radio drama tradition? The aesthetics are spot on.
Oh, absolutely. It possesses all the necessary DNA for a classic radio broadcast. The pacing is deliberate, it doesn't rely on action sequences, the dialogue is rich and carries the philosophical weight of the narrative, and it relies heavily on the theater of the mind.
The audio cues in the source material were so evocative. Just hearing the gentle piano underneath the narration, the distant tolling of the evening church bells across the village green, the rhythmic scraping sound of the old gardener's rake on the gravel path.
You can just see the village in your head.
You don't need a massive visual budget. Those tiny audio details instantly transport you to this quiet, seemingly peaceful, idyllic English village. And establishing that deep peace makes the violent intrusion of a murder feel so much more shocking. It fits the Golden Age detective tradition flawlessly because the atmosphere does half the heavy lifting for the mystery. You feel the setting in your bones.
And within that incredibly rich atmosphere, there are so many brilliant little moments of dialogue and imagery. If we're encouraging listeners to go back and give it a second listen, which they absolutely should, because you pick up so much more when you know the ending, what stood out to you. I know I have my favorite moment.
Oh, I have mine too. But you go first. What was your favorite scene or piece of dialogue upon review?
For me, it's the exchange between Father Brown and Inspector Gresham in the parish hall when they're looking at the map of the village. Gresham lays out this incredibly logical, obvious explanation for the two murders. He connects the dots perfectly, assuming a single killer is eliminating a witness based on physical proximity and timing.
It sounds so convincing when he says it.
It sounds airtight. He asks Father Brown if he agrees that the theory is reasonable, and Father Brown looks at him and says, "I agree that it is reasonable, but I have found that reasonable explanations are rather like umbrellas. They are wonderfully useful, but they are not the sky."
That is such a perfectly Chestertonian line. It's witty, it's grounded, and it's profoundly deep all at once.
It perfectly captures the limitation of purely material logic. Human reason is a great tool. It keeps the rain off your head. It helps you navigate the immediate physical world. But if you think your little umbrella of logic encompasses the vast, terrifying, beautiful, spiritual complexity of the entire universe, you are a fool.
You just miss the bigger picture.
You're mistaking the tool for the reality it operates within. Gresham thinks his umbrella is the whole world.
That's brilliant. My favorite moment is much quieter, but it's the image that has stuck in my head ever since I finished the story. It's the recurring image of little Emily carefully watering the mustard plants. Throughout all the chaos of the story, the police arriving with their sirens, the reporters calling, the gruesome autopsies, the intense interrogations in the parlor, she just quietly keeps tending the garden, and it stands in such direct poetic opposition to what Jonathan Mercer is doing in the shadows.
The dual cultivation we were talking about earlier.
Yes. Think about it. Emily is performing an ordinary daily act of cultivating life and beauty in the open air. Mercer has spent 30 years in the dark corners of his pharmacy, secretly cultivating vengeance and death. They are both tending gardens, but with entirely different harvests.
It's a striking contrast.
And Emily's faithful, quiet action is what ultimately offers Mercer his only chance at redemption when she promises to pray for him. It's a stunning piece of writing because it shows you the theme rather than telling you.
And that leads to a crucial point about how this story functions as literature. It successfully hides profound theology inside a standard detective fiction narrative, without ever once becoming preachy or heavy-handed. And I want to specifically mention how it weaves in Benedictine spirituality alongside the Gospel of Matthew.
Okay, stop right there because I want to make sure everyone follows this. When you say Benedictine spirituality, what exactly are you referring to in the context of this murder mystery?
I'm referring to the core motto of the Rule of St. Benedict Ora et Labora. Pray and work. Benedictine spirituality teaches that the spiritual life isn't just about floating in the clouds having mystical visions.
It's grounded.
It's about finding God in the dirt, in the daily labor, in the washing of pots, and the tending of gardens. It's the sanctification of the ordinary. Emily watering the garden is the physical manifestation of Ora et Labora. She is doing the mundane work, but it has profound spiritual weight. The story takes that monastic theology in the parable of the mustard seed and buries them so deeply in the plot that you don't even realize you're being taught.
You don't feel like you were being lectured from a pulpit. You're just trying to solve a locked room murder mystery.
But while you are intensely trying to figure out how the window was locked from the outside with a piece of cord, you are accidentally absorbing a masterclass on the nature of sin, the danger of institutional greed, and the power of grace. Chesterton believed that truth was best delivered through the imagination. By wrapping the theology in a murder mystery, the author allows you, the listener, to actually experience the parable of the mustard seed, rather than just being lectured on its historical context.
So as our expert guide to this incredible material, let me throw the big question to you one final time. Why does this matter beyond the mystery itself? Why should we care about St. Bartholomew and Father Brown today?
It matters because it proves that ordinary people and ordinary places are not the background furniture of the universe. They are the front line. The quiet village of St. Bartholomew, the modest memorial garden, the dusty local pharmacy, these aren't boring places where nothing happens. They're the exact locations where the ultimate battles for the human soul actually take place.
Not on some grand stage.
The battle between heaven and hell isn't just fought in the halls of power, or in massive cathedrals, or on grand historical battlefields. It is fought in the heart of a pharmacist weighing a 30-year grudge behind a counter. And it is fought in the hands of a little girl holding a watering can in a memorial garden.
So what does this all mean?
It means we have to wake up to the gravity of our everyday lives.
We really do. And that brings us to a final thought I want to leave you with, something for you to mull over as you go about the rest of your day. This deep dive has reminded us that the greatest mysteries we encounter in literature and the greatest mysteries we encounter in life are rarely about discovering the mechanics of a crime.
They're rarely about the how.
Right. They are rarely about finding out who pulled the trigger or how the poison was administered or how the room was locked. The greatest mysteries are about understanding how tiny, seemingly insignificant choices slowly, day by day, shape a human soul.
It's all about the seeds we plant.
Every single day, in the casual things you say to your family, the way you treat a stranger in the grocery store, the small, justified resentments you hold on to at work, or the quiet acts of forgiveness you offer when no one is looking out, you are planting mustard seeds. The only question you have to answer is, what kind of garden are you growing?
That's the real question.
If you haven't yet, or if you want to experience it with entirely fresh ears now that you know the hidden architecture, I highly invite you to go back and read or listen to The Mustard Seed Murders again. There are so many layers, so many tiny clues we couldn't even touch on today that will suddenly stand out to you.
You'll hear it completely differently the second time around.
We want to thank everyone for joining us here at the little station on Commercial Street. If you love this kind of deep literary and theological exploration, we invite you to become a paid supporter of Chesterton Radio. It is your support, and your support alone, that makes these original Father Brown mysteries, the daily morning prayer broadcasts, these deep dives, and our ongoing classic radio preservation work possible.
It's totally fan-supported. You can find everything in the Chesterton Radio World ecosystem online. We have our live 24/7 stream, an incredible library of original stories and essays, our Saturday night theater productions, more of these under-the-hood literary deep dives, our daily morning prayer, and of course you can visit shop.chestertonradio.com. It's a wonderful community to be a part of, dedicated to finding the wonder in the ordinary things the rest of the world ignores.
It truly is. So, from both of us here in Atchison, until next time, keep wondering. The open door is always on.
Until next time, keep wondering. The open door is always on.